"Uncle, they want to kill my mother. He said that if I tell anyone, I will never see her again," the boy whispered, his voice trembling with fear and tears in his eyes. Vin Diesel froze, his face turning pale. Suddenly, the atmosphere of the noisy restaurant disappeared, and the whole world narrowed down to this small, frightened child in front of him. "Where is your mother now?" he asked quietly, leaning towards the boy. "At home. He locked her in the basement. She can't move." Vin pulled out his phone and dialed 911. At that moment, he noticed a tall man in an expensive suit striding towards their table, his eyes blazing with rage. "Police! I need urgent help. It seems there is a kidnapping and attempted murder. The most intense part is still to come. Stay with us to see how it all ends. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it." It was a spring day in New York City, filled with bright sunlight streaming through the glass facades of skyscrapers. Manhattan was buzzing with its usual bustle. Crowds of people rushing about their business, yellow cabs honking at intersections, and street vendors beckoning to passers-by to try their wares. Vin Diesel, the famous actor with the impressive physique and distinctive deep voice, had just finished a benefit for children with cancer at Memorial Sloan Kettering. He spent several hours playing with the children, signing autographs and trying to distract them from their difficult battle with the disease. Vin left the clinic feeling emotionally drained. Seeing children fighting for their lives with a smile on their face was never easy for him. He got into his black SUV and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to collect his thoughts. His stomach made a slight growl. He hadn't had time to eat a proper meal since the morning. Instead of heading to one of Manhattan's trendy restaurants, where he would likely be recognized, or heading to his apartment in the upscale Tribeca neighborhood, Vin made a surprise decision. He turned onto Lexington Avenue, heading for a small Burger King he'd spotted on his way to the event. Sometimes the simple things are just what you need, he thought as he parked his car in a small lot next to a fast food restaurant. Vin wore a simple black baseball cap and sunglasses, a minimal disguise that sometimes helped him avoid excessive attention. He had no illusions about being recognizable, but he hoped to simply eat in peace without having to pose for photos with every customer. Inside Burger King, the atmosphere was typical of lunchtime. Parents with children, office workers grabbing a quick bite to eat on their break, a few older couples leisurely eating and catching up on the latest news. The smell of fried patties, potatoes, and spices filled the room, bringing back fond memories for Vin of the pre-glory days. He ordered a double cheeseburger, a large order of fries, and a Diet Coke. Oddly enough, even Hollywood superstars sometimes watch their calories. After receiving his order, Vin found a relatively secluded table in the far corner of the restaurant, sat with his back to the wall, and began eating while watching the diners. Out of habit developed over years of publicity, he automatically assessed those around him, determining who might recognize him. A couple of teenagers cast curious glances in his direction, but seemed hesitant to approach, which suited the actor just fine. An older couple at the next table were completely engrossed in conversation and paid no attention to him. But one table in particular caught Vin's attention. A man and a boy of about 8 or 9 were sitting there. The contrast between them was striking. The man, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit with a barely noticeable blue stripe, exuded an aura of cool authority. His movements were sparse, calculating, and his expression remained impenetrable, except for the rare moments when he cast an irritated glance at the boy. The boy, skinny, with tousled brown hair and wearing a plain red t-shirt with a superhero on it, seemed incongruously small and fragile next to the man. In his hands he held a toy truck with a broken wheel, which, judging by his careful attitude, was very dear to him. Vin noticed that the child had barely touched his food. He sat motionless, only occasionally casting quick glances at the man, as if checking his reaction. There was something in those glances that made Vin wary. Fear, almost animalistic, instinctive. The man kept answering the phone, speaking in a quiet but firm voice, often whispering. When the boy accidentally dropped his napkin, the man jerked and gave him such a look that the child sank into his seat, his shoulders slumping even more. Something about the picture bothered Vin. Over the years working in Hollywood and doing charity work, he had learned to recognize signs of trouble in children. This boy had all the classic symptoms: wariness, avoidance of eye contact, a desire to be invisible. Vin continued eating, but now most of his attention was focused on the strange couple. At some point, the man, having received another call, abruptly stood up and headed for the exit, apparently to talk more privately. Before leaving, he leaned over to the boy and said something to him. Vin couldn't hear the words, but he saw how the child tensed up even more and nodded with an expression of absolute fear on his face. As soon as the man walked out the restaurant doors, the boy quickly looked around. His gaze met Vin's for a second, and the actor saw the pleading and desperate look in it. The child seemed to have made some important decision. He clutched his toy truck tighter, and after another glance at the door the man had exited through, slid out of his seat. Vin watched as the boy moved slowly, as if trying to be inconspicuous, between the tables, clearly heading towards him. With each step, his movements became more uncertain, but the determination in his eyes did not fade. As the child approached, Vin saw that his small hands were shaking, and on his right cheek there was a barely noticeable bruise, skillfully hidden by some kind of makeup. "Hey, buddy," Vin said, trying to speak as gently as possible so as not to frighten the boy even more. The child stopped a few steps away from the table, clutching his broken toy tightly to his chest. His eyes, large and brown, were filled with fear, but there was also a desperate hope in them. After a moment's hesitation, he took the final step and stopped right next to Vin's table. You're that actor, aren't you?" the boy whispered so quietly that Vin barely heard him. "Yes, it's me," Vin replied with a slight smile. "My name is Vin. What's your name?" The boy glanced nervously at the door before answering. Jason Brooks." "Nice to meet you, Jason," Vin said, watching the boy's reaction carefully. "You have a cool truck. What happened to it?" Jason looked down at his toy, his bottom lip trembling for a moment. "He broke it. He said I was playing too loudly." There was so much pain in those simple words that Vin felt his chest tighten. He knew he had to tread carefully. "Who broke it, Jason? The man you were sitting with at the table?" The boy nodded, casting another nervous glance at the door. "This is Mr. Richardson. He's not my dad. My dad's dead. Mr. Richardson says he's responsible for my mom and me now." Jason said the last word with a special pain in his voice. Vin sensed that the situation was much more serious than it seemed at first glance. He moved delicately, making room next to him. "Do you want to sit down? We can talk about your truck. Maybe I can help fix it." Jason looked at the door again, and real desperation flashed in his eyes. "We don't have much time. He'll be back soon." The boy came very close to Vin, and leaning towards his ear, whispered the words that changed everything. "Uncle, they want to kill my mother. He said that if I tell anyone, I'll never see her again." Vin Diesel froze, his face turning pale. Suddenly, the atmosphere of the noisy restaurant disappeared, and the whole world narrowed down to this small, frightened child in front of him. "Where is your mother now?" he asked quietly, leaning towards the boy. "At home. He locked her in the basement. She can't move." Vin pulled out his phone and dialed 911. At that moment, he noticed a tall man in an expensive suit striding towards their table, his eyes blazing with rage. "Police? I need urgent help. It seems there is a kidnapping and attempted murder." The 911 operator quickly answered, and Vin, trying to speak calmly despite his growing anxiety, began to explain the situation. "This is Vin Diesel. I'm at a Burger King on Lexington Avenue. There's a boy here who says his mother is in danger. I think that's pretty serious." "Sir, I understand," the female voice on the other end of the line replied. "Can you confirm the address?" Vin quickly recited the building number he had memorized when he parked. "We're sending a patrol. Stay on the line. Is the child still with you?" "Yes, he's here, but—" Vin didn't finish his sentence because at that moment Mr. Richardson stopped next to their table, his face distorted with rage, although he was clearly trying to maintain the appearance of calm. "Jason," the man said with forced gentleness, though his eyes betrayed his true emotions. "What are you doing? I told you to wait for me at the table." The boy flinched and instinctively pressed himself closer to Vin. The actor placed a protective hand on Jason's shoulder and looked calmly at the man. "Hello, we're just talking about his toy. I noticed that it has a broken wheel." Richardson looked from Jason to Vin, studying his face carefully. Recognition flashed in his eyes for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "That's very kind of you, but we have things to do. Come on, Jason." He reached out to take the boy's shoulder. Vin stood up, still holding the phone to his ear. Richardson was tall, almost as tall as the actor himself, but Vin had the advantage in physicality. He saw Richardson's gaze flicker to the phone. "Who are you talking to?" the man asked, his voice taking on a tense tone. "With the police," Vin answered bluntly, deciding not to hide the situation. "Jason told me some disturbing things about his mother." Richardson's face contorted in shock for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. His lips stretched into an insincere smile. There must be some misunderstanding. Jason is a very impressionable boy. He has a rich imagination. His mother is fine. She just isn't feeling well today and stayed home to rest. In the basement? Vin asked, not taking his eyes off Richardson's face. Richardson tensed, and his smile grew even more strained. I don't know what he told you, but I assure you, it's all a figment of his imagination. Jason, tell the truth. He looked at the boy intently, and there was an undisguised threat in his gaze. Jason's trembling grew even more intense, his small fingers clenching around the broken toy so tightly his knuckles turned white. He looked up at Vin, his eyes filled with pure terror. At that moment, a young waitress with short red hair and a scattering of freckles on her face approached the table. She cast a worried glance at the tense scene before her. Everything all right, gentlemen? She asked, her gaze moving from Vin to the trembling boy, and then to Richardson. Everything is fine, Richardson answered quickly. We're leaving now. No, actually, Vin said, still holding the phone to his ear. The 911 operator was still listening. We'll wait for the police. They're on their way. Richardson straightened up, his face a mask of cold fury. And you're making a huge mistake. Do you know who I am? I can destroy your career with one phone call. Vin didn't flinch. Do you know who I am? He answered calmly. I am the one who will not let you take this boy until we find out what is happening to his mother. The waitress, having assessed the situation, intervened. I'll call the manager. No need, Richardson said sharply. It's a family matter. Are you his father? She asked, her gaze becoming more attentive, assessing the situation as potentially dangerous. No, but I am his legal guardian, Richardson replied, though there was a slight hesitation in his voice. His hand twitched nervously toward the inside pocket of his jacket, but he restrained himself. Do you have any documents to prove it? The waitress continued, and Vin silently thanked her for her quick thinking. Richardson clearly hadn't expected the question. He hesitated, his confidence wavering. Not on me, but it doesn't matter. Jason, let's go now. He reached out to grab the boy's hand. Vin took a step forward, blocking Jason's view with his body. I think it would be better for everyone to calm down and wait for the police. They will be able to clarify the situation. Richardson's face twisted in barely contained rage. He glanced around, noticing that their confrontation was beginning to attract the attention of other patrons. Several had already pulled out their phones, possibly filming the proceedings. You'll regret this, he said through clenched teeth. You'll regret it very much. The patrol will be there in 3 minutes, the voice on Vin's phone said. Stay where you are and do not engage in conflict. Richardson seemed to register this information. He took a step back, his gaze darting between Vin, Jason, and the exit. It was obvious he was weighing his options. Okay, he finally said with a forced smile. Let's wait for the police. They'll quickly sort out this misunderstanding. He took another step back and sat down at the nearest table, keeping an eye on Vin and Jason. Vin knew the situation was still dangerous. He carefully lowered himself back into his seat, gesturing for Jason to sit next to him. It'll be okay, buddy, he said quietly to the boy. The police are on their way, and we'll sort this out. Jason nodded, but his eyes were full of tears. You don't understand, he whispered. He's very dangerous. And Mom, she's been there for so long. Tell me about your mother, Vin asked softly, trying to distract the boy from his fear and at the same time get more information. What's her name? Emily, Jason said, his voice shaking. Emily Brooks. She's really nice. She's a nurse at a big hospital, and she likes to bake chocolate chip cookies on the weekends. Vin smiled, trying to encourage the boy. Sounds great. Where do you live? Jason gave an address in Queens, and Vin repeated it to the 911 operator. How long has Mr. Richardson been with you? The actor asked cautiously, watching the man out of the corner of his eye as he kept his gaze fixed on them. After Dad died, Jason answered quietly. He was Mom's co-worker at the hospital. At first he was nice, helping Mom with her chores. And then the boy trailed off, his small face contorted with the pain of the memory. What happened next, Jason? Vin nudged him gently. He got mean, yelling at Mom, making her do things she didn't want to do. And this morning, Jason's voice shook. They had a big fight. He pushed Mom, and she fell down the stairs. And then he dragged her into the basement and locked her in. Told me if I told anyone, I'd never see her again. Vin felt a cold fury rise in his chest. He glanced at Richardson, who sat with an unreadable expression, watching them. You were very brave to tell me, Vin said, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. I promise we'll find your mother and help her. At that moment, the door to the restaurant swung open and 2 police officers entered, a tall African-American man with a close-cropped beard and a blonde woman with a determined look. They quickly assessed the situation and headed toward Vin's table. "Mr. Diesel," the policeman said, "I'm Officer Jackson. This is Officer Morgan. We've received your call." Richardson immediately rose from his seat and walked toward the police officers, exuding confidence and authority. "Officers, I'm glad you're here. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The boy was obviously playing around, and Mr. Diesel believed his fantasies." Officer Morgan looked from Richardson to Jason, who pressed himself even closer to Vin. "Who are you, sir?" she asked. "Alexander Richardson," the man replied with a professional smile. "I'm Jason's mother's partner, and I'm looking after him temporarily while she's taking a break. She's had a hard day at work." "In the basement with broken bones?" Vin interjected, not taking his eyes off the police officers. Richardson frowned. "This is ridiculous. Emily is in her bedroom relaxing. Jason clearly made something up to get attention. He has a rich imagination." Officer Jackson squatted in front of the boy. "Hi, Jason. I'm Marcus. Can you tell me what happened to your mom?" Jason looked to Vin for support. The actor nodded, and the boy took a deep breath and repeated his story. Richardson's face grew more tense as he spoke. "That's absurd," he interrupted when Jason finished. "The kid is just imagining things. Call Emily if you want. She'll tell you everything's okay." "That's a great idea," Officer Morgan said. "Would you mind calling her right now?" Richardson hesitated but quickly regained his composure. "Sure," he said, taking out his phone. "But she might be sleeping. She worked a double shift yesterday." He dialed the number and turned on the speakerphone. The phone rang, but there was no answer. After a few rings, voicemail came on. "See? She must be asleep," Richardson said, cutting off the call. "Or locked in a basement without a phone," Vin said quietly, not taking his eyes off the man. Officer Jackson straightened up. "I think it would be better if we go to the specified address and check if everything is okay with the boy's mother." "It's a waste of time," Richardson said, but his voice was growing worried. "You don't have a warrant. You can't just barge into someone's house without a reason." "We have a witness statement about possible danger to life," Officer Morgan replied calmly, gesturing at Jason. "Under these circumstances, we are obligated to investigate the situation, even without a warrant. Mr. Richardson, will you come with us?" Richardson glanced around the restaurant. By now, many of the patrons were openly watching the drama unfold, some even filming it on their phones. He was cornered, and he knew it. "Of course," he finally said. "I'm not hiding anything." "I'm going too," Vin said firmly. "Jason trusted me, and I'm not leaving him now." The officers looked at each other. "We don't usually take civilians," Jackson began. "I'll stay in the car if I have to," Vin said. "But Jason's scared, and he needs someone he trusts." After a brief discussion, the officers agreed. They left the restaurant, where by this time a small crowd of onlookers had gathered, attracted by the sight of the police car and rumors of a celebrity's presence. Richardson was placed in the back of one patrol car with Officer Jackson, while Vin and Jason were placed in a second with Officer Morgan. As they drove off, Vin noticed Richardson rapidly typing on his phone before Officer Jackson asked him to put the device away. "Jason, can you tell me anything else about what happened this morning?" Officer Morgan asked, looking at the boy through the rearview mirror. Jason, still clutching his broken toy tightly, nodded. "Mom didn't want to go anywhere with Mr. Richardson. He said something about Mexico and that no one would find us there. Mom said she wasn't going anywhere and that she would call—" He hesitated, trying to remember. "Some agency. Then he got really angry and pushed her. She fell down the stairs and didn't move. I got scared and screamed, but Mr. Richardson grabbed me and said that if I didn't keep quiet, he would do the same to me." Vin felt his heart clench. He placed a supportive hand on the boy's shoulder. "He dragged my mom into the basement," Jason continued. "I heard her crying, but then it was quiet. He locked the door and took the key. Then he made me get dressed and told me we were going to dinner and then to the airport. He said if I told anyone, I'd never see my mom again." Officer Morgan nodded, her face hardening. "You're very brave, Jason. We'll help your mother, I promise." Police cars raced through the streets of New York, sirens clearing a path through the dense city traffic. Vin watched the city flash by outside his window and thought about the strange irony of having played so many action heroes who saved lives on screen, and now he found himself in a real-life situation where a human life was at stake. Jason sat silently, holding tightly to his truck like a life preserver in a stormy sea. Vin noticed the boy moving his lips silently, perhaps praying or talking to his absent mother. "It's going to be okay," Vin said quietly. though inside he was worried. What if they were too late? What if the woman was really badly hurt and unconscious or worse? The drive to Queens took 20 minutes. They turned into a quiet residential area of neat two-story houses, many of which dated back to the 1950s. The patrol cars stopped in front of a house with a pale blue facade and a well-kept but modest garden. "Is this your house?" Vin asked Jason. The boy nodded, his face tightening at the sight of the familiar building. "Wait here with Mr. Diesel," Officer Morgan said as she got out of the car. Vin watched as Officers Jackson and Morgan pulled Richardson out of another patrol car. The man no longer exuded the confidence he had in the restaurant. His movements were stiff, his eyes darting. He kept checking his phone until Officer Jackson took the device away, which only seemed to increase his nervousness. The officers walked toward the front door, Richardson walking between them. Officer Jackson knocked, loudly announcing the police, but there was no answer. Richardson pulled out his keys and after a moment's hesitation opened the door. "Stay here," Vin said to Jason. "I'll see what's going on and get right back to you." The boy looked at him with concern. "Will you find Mom?" "I promise," Vin replied, and getting out of the car quickly approached the house. He paused at the threshold, allowing the officers to enter first. Through the open door, he heard Officer Morgan calling out, "Mrs. Brooks, this is the New York police. Are you there?" The silence of the house seemed ominous. Inside, it was neat and clean, but Vin immediately noticed signs of a struggle. An overturned vase of flowers, mail scattered on the hallway floor, a slightly displaced carpet. "Where's the basement?" Officer Jackson asked, his hand on his holster. Richardson stood motionless, his face pale. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You have no right." "Where's the basement?" Jackson repeated more harshly. "There," Vin pointed to the door at the end of the hall, noticing that it had a new, obviously recently installed lock. Jason said there was a basement in the house, and his mother was in there. The officers headed for the designated door, Richardson reluctantly following behind. Vin hung back a little, ready to block the exit if necessary if Richardson decided to escape. Officer Jackson tried the door handle, but it was locked. "The key," he demanded, holding out his hand to Richardson. The man hesitated, his eyes darting between the police, the door, and Vin. "I don't have it," he said finally. "Emily must have locked herself in." "The door locks from the outside," Officer Morgan noted, pointing to the lock. "And it's new." Without another word, Officer Jackson stepped back and kicked the door down hard. The hinges came crashing out of the frame, and the door swung open, revealing a steep flight of stairs leading down into darkness. "Mrs. Brooks," Jackson called, turning on the flashlight on his phone. "NYPD, are you there?" A faint groan was heard from the depths of the basement. "Oh my God," Officer Morgan whispered and ran down the stairs, turning on her flashlight. Vin stepped forward, but Richardson blocked his path. The man looked cornered and desperate, which made him especially dangerous. His hand slid into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Don't do anything stupid," Vin warned, tensing his muscles, ready for a possible attack. Richardson's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand. You've ruined everything. We should have been on the plane by now." His voice shook with anger. "She and that little bastard belong to me." Before Vin could react, Richardson pulled something out of his pocket. Not a gun, as he had feared, but a sharp folding knife. The blade snapped open in his hand. "Get out of the way," Richardson hissed, lunging towards Vin. Vin, thanks to years of action movie training, instinctively ducked, avoiding the blow. He grabbed Richardson's wrist and twisted it sharply, causing the man to cry out in pain and drop the knife. Without giving Richardson time to recover, Vin made a quick grab and pinned the man against the wall, twisting his arm behind his back. The officers' voices and the woman's weak moans could be heard from the basement. "Officer Jackson!" Vin shouted. "I need help here!" Richardson writhed in Vin's grip, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know enough," Vin said, increasing the pressure on Richardson's arm, causing him to freeze in pain. "You attacked a woman, locked her in a basement, and threatened a child. That's enough for me to consider you scum." Officer Jackson appeared on the stairs, his face grim. "We need an ambulance. Morgan's calling." He saw Vin holding Richardson down and quickly pulled out handcuffs. "Good job, Mr. Diesel." "He tried to attack me with a knife," Vin said, nodding at the folding knife that had fallen to the floor. Jackson picked up the weapon and examined it. "Alexander Richardson, you are under arrest for assault with a deadly weapon, holding a person against his will, causing bodily harm, and endangering the life of a child." Richardson continued to resist even when Jackson snapped handcuffs onto his wrists. "You can't prove any of this," he shouted. "It's her fault. She was going to leave me. No one can do this to me." "Take him away," Jackson ordered a patrolman who had apparently been called in to help, "and make sure he gets his rights read to him." As Richardson was being led out of the house, Vin hurried down the stairs to the basement. What he saw there made his heart clench. In the corner of the basement, lying on an old mattress, was a pale woman in her mid-30s. Her blonde hair was matted and partially covered in dried blood, and her right leg was in an unnatural position, clearly broken. Officer Morgan sat next to her, holding her hand and speaking soothing words. "The ambulance is on its way," Morgan said when she saw Vin. "She's conscious, but very weak. It looks like she has a concussion and a broken leg. There are signs of strangulation." The woman on the mattress opened her eyes with difficulty, her vision clouded with pain. "Jason," she whispered, "where is my boy?" "He's safe," Vin said quickly, kneeling down next to her. "He's in a police car. He's very brave, you know. He was the one who called for help." A faint smile touched the woman's lips. "My brave boy," she murmured, a tear rolling down her cheek. "And Alex?" "Under arrest," Officer Morgan replied. "He won't hurt you anymore, Mrs. Brooks." "Emily," the woman corrected weakly. "I'm Emily." "Help is on the way, Emily," Vin said, looking at her pale face. "Everything will be fine." The basement was cold and damp, and Vin took off his jacket to cover the shivering woman. He noticed bruises on her neck and wrists, signs of struggle and abuse. Anger and compassion warred in his soul. "How long?" he asked Officer Morgan quietly. "Apparently since this morning," she answered just as quietly. "There's no water, no food, no toilet. He left her to die." Outside, the sound of an approaching ambulance siren could be heard. Vin rose to his feet. I'll go to Jason and tell him that we found his mom, and she'll be okay." Officer Morgan nodded, not letting go of Emily's hand. "Tell him that she really wants to see him, but first the doctors need to help her." Vin went upstairs and left the house. A small crowd of curious neighbors had already gathered outside, attracted by the police cars and ambulance. He recognized a few people from TV shows and movies filming the scene on their phones, but Vin ignored them. He walked up to the police car where Jason sat, clutching his broken truck tightly and staring at the house with wide, fearful eyes. When he saw Vin, the boy opened the window. "Did you find Mom?" he asked in a trembling voice. Vin opened the door and sat down next to him. "Yes, we found her. She's alive and asking about you. She needs medical attention, but she'll be fine." He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You saved her life, Jason. You're a real hero." The boy's face lit up with hope. "Really? He didn't kill her?" "No, I didn't. She got hurt and she needs to go to the hospital, but the doctors will help her, and she will recover soon." Jason suddenly burst into tears, loud sobs racking his small body. They were tears of relief, pent-up fear, and all the horror he had endured. Vin gently held the boy, letting him cry it out. "And Mr. Richardson will not come back again?" Jason asked through tears. "No," Vin said firmly. "The police took him away, and he will never harm you again." The paramedics carried Emily out of the house on a stretcher. Jason flinched when he saw his mother, and Vin helped him out of the car. They walked to the ambulance where the paramedics were preparing to load the woman inside. "Mom!" Jason shouted, and Emily, hearing her son's voice, turned her head with difficulty. "Jason," she whispered, holding out a trembling hand to him. The boy ran up to the stretcher. The medics stepped aside for a moment, allowing mother and son a brief meeting. Emily stroked Jason's tear-stained cheek. "My brave boy. You saved me." "I was scared, Mom. He said he would kill you if I told anyone." "But you told me anyway," Emily said proudly. "You did the right thing." She turned her gaze to Vin, who was standing next to her. "Thank you," she said in a weak voice. "If it weren't for you—" "It's all Jason," Vin replied with a smile. "He's a real hero." The doctors politely but firmly interrupted the conversation. "We need to go. She needs urgent medical attention." "I'm going with Mom," Jason cried, clinging to the stretcher. Officer Morgan walked up to them. "Of course you can go with your mother," she said softly, "but first we need to arrange something. Is there anyone who could take care of you while your mother's in the hospital? A grandmother? A grandfather? An aunt?" Jason looked at his mother in confusion. "Aunt Sarah," Emily said weakly. "My sister. She lives in Brooklyn. Her number's in my phone, but I don't know where it is." "We'll find him," Officer Morgan assured. In the meantime, Jason will go with you to the hospital. I'll accompany you. Emily nodded gratefully, and the medics began loading the stretcher into the ambulance. Jason turned to Vin, his face still wet with tears, but with a new determination in his eyes. "Thank you for believing me," he said seriously. "No one would have believed me if it weren't for you." Vin squatted down to be level with the boy. "I always believe kids," he said. "And you know what? Your truck. I think we could fix it." Jason looked at his broken toy, and for the first time in a long time, a shy smile appeared on his face. "Is it true?" "Sure." Vin pulled out his phone. "I'll write down your address, and as soon as your mom feels better, I'll send you a new truck. Even better than this one." Jason suddenly rushed towards Vin and hugged him tightly, burying his face in his shoulder. "You're a real hero," the boy whispered. "Like in the movies, only for real." Vin hugged Jason back, feeling a lump in his throat. He'd played dozens of heroes in his career, saving the world from disasters and villains, but he'd never felt like a real hero like he did in that moment. "Jason, we have to go," Officer Morgan called from the ambulance. The boy let go of Vin and ran toward the ambulance. Before he climbed in, he turned and waved at Vin. Vin waved back, standing on the sidewalk among curious neighbors and the few reporters who had already arrived at the scene. After the ambulance left, Officer Jackson approached Vin. "We found passports, plane tickets to Mexico, and a large amount of cash in his car," he said. "It looks like he was actually planning to take it out of the country today. If it weren't for you—" He didn't finish the sentence, but everything was clear without words. "We'll need your statement," Jackson continued, "but that can wait until tomorrow. You can come to the station at your convenience." Vin nodded. "Of course. I'll come tomorrow morning." The Queens police station was the usual early morning, controlled chaos. Officers were chatting, phones were ringing, clerks were scurrying between desks with file folders. Vin Diesel, dressed casually in jeans, a black t-shirt, and a leather jacket, immediately attracted attention when he walked into the room. "Mr. Diesel." Officer Jackson, seeing the actor, stood up from his desk and approached him. "Thank you for coming." "How are they?" Vin asked immediately, shaking the policeman's hand. "Emily and Jason?" Jackson gestured for Vin to follow him to a quieter area of the squad room. "Mrs. Brooks is at Queens General right now," he said as they sat down in a small conference room. "A broken tibia, a concussion, multiple bruises, and evidence of strangulation. But the doctors say she'll be fine. She's lucky they found her when she did." "And Jason?" "His aunt arrived last night. They're in the hospital with Emily now. The boy's holding up well, considering all he's been through." Vin nodded, feeling relieved. "And Richardson?" Jackson's face hardened. "It's an interesting situation. We ran a background check on him. Alexander Richardson, 42, a cardiac surgeon at the same hospital where Emily works. Impeccable reputation, well-respected in the medical community. No previous legal troubles." Jackson paused. "But when we started digging deeper, some disturbing details emerged. 2 ex-girlfriends had filed domestic violence complaints against him, but then withdrew them. One of them suddenly moved to another state. The other simply refused to testify. He scared them," Vin suggested. "It seems that way," Jackson agreed. "Emily told us that they started dating about a year ago, a few months after her husband died. At first everything was fine, but then he became controlling of her every move, isolated her from her friends and family, and became aggressive. When she tried to break up with him, he threatened her and Jason." Vin shook his head, feeling anger rising inside him. "What will happen to him now?" "We've charged him with attempted murder, grievous bodily harm, false imprisonment, menacing, and assault with a deadly weapon. Given the evidence we have, including your testimony and Jason's, as well as the medical report of Emily's injuries, he's facing a lengthy prison sentence." Jackson chuckled. "His attorney has already offered a plea deal to the prosecution, but the prosecution has refused. They want to take this to trial." "That's good, Vin said. "He deserves the maximum punishment." "Another interesting detail," Jackson added, lowering his voice. "We discovered that Richardson had been transferring large sums of money to offshore accounts in recent months. The Financial Crimes Unit is investigating these transactions. It's possible he was involved in some illegal activity related to the hospital." Vin raised his eyebrows in surprise. "So his escape could have been connected with more than just Emily and Jason?" "That's one of the leads we're looking into," Jackson confirmed. "Either way, he can't escape responsibility. By the way, Emily would like to talk to you if you have time. She's very grateful for what you've done." Vin nodded. Of course, I'll visit them in the hospital. But first, let's finish with the statement. Half an hour later, Vin finished giving his statement, detailing the events of the previous day. When the formalities were completed, Officer Jackson escorted him to the exit. You know, the policeman said, stopping at the door. We often see the worst side of people in our line of work. But sometimes, like yesterday, we see the best. What you did, not everyone would have intervened. Vin shrugged. I just couldn't pass by, especially when it comes to a child. Jackson nodded in understanding. Either way, Queens is in your debt. And if you ever need help with parking in New York, he winked, you know who to call. Vin laughed, shook the officer's hand, and walked out of the station. A black SUV was waiting for him at the side of the road. But before he got in, he made a call. Danny, it's Vin. Remember how you said your brother owned a toy store? I have a favor to ask of you. Half an hour later, Vin walked into the lobby of Queens General Hospital with a large, colorful box under his arm. At the front desk, he asked for Emily Brooks' room number, and after receiving directions, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway of the trauma ward was relatively quiet. Vin passed several nurses who recognized him with surprise, but kept their emotions professionally contained. He stopped at room 312 and knocked softly. The door was opened by a woman in her mid-30s, very similar to Emily but with darker hair. She looked at Vin in surprise, and recognition showed on her face. Mr. Diesel, she said, her eyes wide. Please come in. I'm Sarah, Emily's sister. She told me everything you did. I don't know how to thank you. Vin smiled modestly as he entered the room. No need to thank me. How is she? The room was a standard hospital room with 2 beds, but the second was empty. Emily was lying on the bed with the headboard raised, her right leg in a cast and elevated on a special stand. There was a bandage on her forehead and bruises on her neck. Despite this, she looked much better than she had yesterday in the basement. The color had returned to her face, and there was a sparkle in her eyes. Jason was sitting next to the bed, busily drawing something in an album. When he saw Vin, the boy jumped up, his face lighting up with a smile. Vin, you've come! He exclaimed, running up to the actor. Vin crouched down to be level with Jason. Of course, I promised I'd come visit you, he said with a smile. How are you holding up, buddy? Good. The doctor said that Mom will get better soon, and then Aunt Sarah and I will live with her until Mom gets better. And they let me stay home from school for the rest of the week. Vin laughed at how quickly the boy recovered. Children had an amazing ability to adapt. I have something for you, he said, handing the box to Jason. The boy's eyes widened when he saw that inside was a large radio-controlled truck, an exact replica of his broken toy, only newer and bigger. Wow, Jason breathed, carefully taking out the toy. Is this for me? You. I promised we'd replace your broken truck, remember? Jason rushed to hug Vin, nearly knocking him over with his enthusiasm. Thank you. This is the best truck in the world. Vin hugged the boy back, feeling warmth spreading in his chest. He looked over Jason's head to Emily, who was watching them from the bed, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Mr. Diesel, she said quietly as Vin approached her bed, I don't know how to express my gratitude. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have survived down there in the basement. Vin sat down on the chair next to the bed. You're welcome, Mrs. Brooks. Jason is a real hero. He was the one who had the courage to ask for help despite the threats. Emily looked lovingly at her son, who was already enthusiastically studying his new truck. I'm proud of him, she said, and I'm so grateful that you were there to believe him. She paused. Officer Jackson told me they found plane tickets and passports. Alex was planning on taking us to Mexico last night. He won't hurt anyone again, Vin assured her. Officer Jackson said there's more than enough evidence to put him away for a long time. Emily nodded, a tear rolling down her cheek. I still can't believe I was so blind. He seemed so caring, so perfect after Robert died. I didn't even notice how he began to control every aspect of our lives, isolating us from our family and friends. She looked at her sister, who was standing by the window. Sarah tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. It's not your fault, Em, Sarah said softly. People like Alex are masters of manipulation. They know how to gain your trust. The important thing is that you're safe now, Vin said, and you have time to heal and recover. Thanks to you, Emily repeated. I don't know how to thank you. Vin smiled. Get well and be happy. This is the best gratitude. At that moment, Jason ran up to the bed, holding his new truck in his hands. Mom, look! It's even better than my old one. And the remote is so cool. Emily smiled at her son, patting his head. That's wonderful, dear. Have you thanked Mr. Diesel? Yes, Jason turned to Vin, his face beaming. Can I show you how it works? Sure, Vin said, but maybe not here. I don't think the nurses would like a racetrack in the ward. Jason laughed, and the sound was the best music for everyone present. The sound of healing, the sound of returning to normal life. Sarah suggested, why don't we go down to the garden? There's a place there where you could try out your new truck. Jason enthusiastically agreed. Before leaving, he ran to his mother and hugged her tightly, careful not to hurt her injuries. I'll be back soon, Mom, he said. I love you. I love you too, honey, Emily replied, kissing his forehead. Go have fun. As Sarah and Jason left the room, Emily looked at Vin, and her eyes filled with tears. You have no idea what a joy it is to see him smile again. The last few months have been difficult. Vin nodded in understanding. Jason is a strong boy, and he has a wonderful mother. You both can handle it. I'm afraid Alex could do us some harm even from prison, Emily admitted. He has connections, money, influence. Officer Jackson told me they were looking into his financial transactions, Vin said. It appears he was moving large amounts of money offshore. This could lead to additional charges. Emily looked surprised. I didn't know about it, she shook her head. I knew so little about him, even though we'd been together for almost a year. What matters is what you know now, Vin said. And never forget, what he did wasn't your fault. It was his fault. Emily nodded, wiping away her tears. Thank you, Mr. Diesel, for everything. Call me Vin, please. Vin, she smiled. You know, Jason's always been a fan of yours. He has a poster of you in his room. He used to say he wanted to be as strong and brave as you when he grew up. Vin felt his heart squeeze. He is already strong and brave, he answered seriously. Perhaps even braver than me. They talked some more about Emily's plans for the future. She told them that when she recovered, she wanted to move closer to her sister, maybe even to another city, to start over. Vin was fully supportive of this idea. A new beginning may be just what you need, he said. And if you need any help, don't hesitate to reach out. He left her his personal phone number, promising that he would always be ready to help. I have to go, Vin said, standing up. But I'll stop by to say goodbye to Jason before I go. Of course, Emily nodded. Thank you again, Vin, for believing a little boy when he approached you in a restaurant. It changed our lives. Vin smiled and walked out of the room, heading for the hospital garden where Jason was supposed to test drive his new truck. As he walked down the hall, he noticed two police officers standing by the elevator, Officers Jackson and Morgan. They looked serious and worried. Did something happen? Vin asked, approaching them. Mr. Diesel, Jackson said, shaking his hand quickly. It's good to have you here. We've got a situation. What's going on? Vin asked warily. Officer Morgan looked around to make sure no one was nearby and lowered her voice. Homakim, Richardson managed to contact someone outside. We intercepted a phone call he made from the station. He ordered someone to silence Emily and Jason. Vin felt a chill run down his spine. Are you sure? Absolutely, Jackson nodded. Our tech team was listening to all his communications. He was using some kind of code, but the meaning was clear. He wants to eliminate witnesses. Damn it, Vin cursed. What can we do? We've got guards posted outside Emily's room, Jackson said, and we're preparing the paperwork to move them into witness protection if necessary. But we need to find Jason and his aunt right now. They're in the garden, Vin said quickly. Jason wanted to play with his new truck. Let's go, Morgan commanded, and they quickly headed for the stairs, deciding not to wait for the elevator. After going down to the first floor, they hurried to the exit to the hospital garden, a well-kept green area with paths, benches, and a small fountain in the center. Vin immediately noticed Sarah sitting on a bench near the fountain. She was talking on the phone and did not notice their approach, but Jason wasn't next to her. Where is the boy? Jackson asked sharply as they approached the bench. Sarah winced, interrupting the phone conversation. What? Oh, Jason. She looked around. He was here just now, playing with his truck by the fountain. Vin felt his heart skip a beat. He looked around, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. Jason, he called loudly. Jason, where are you? Officers Jackson and Morgan quickly split up, searching the garden area. How long has it been since you saw him? Vin asked Sarah, who had risen from the bench, her face reflecting growing alarm. Just a minute or two, she replied, looking around. I got a call and got distracted. He was right here. Vin rushed towards the fountain, scanning the area around him. He noticed a toy truck lying on its side at the edge of the path, as if it had been abandoned in a hurry or dropped from someone's hands. Next to it was a remote control. "Jackson!" Vin called, picking up the toy. "His truck is here." The officer quickly ran up to him, his hand instinctively going to his holster. "Damn it," he cursed, looking around. "Morgan, block all exits from the hospital and call for backup." Officer Morgan nodded and immediately contacted dispatch on the radio, requesting a hospital lockdown. Vin continued to scan the area. His gaze fell on a small service door at the back of the garden, almost hidden behind a hedge. The door was slightly open. "There!" he shouted, already rushing towards the door. Jackson followed, drawing his gun as he went. They reached the door and carefully opened it. It revealed a narrow service corridor, probably leading to the back of the hospital. "Stay here, Mr. Diesel," Jackson said. "This could be dangerous." But Vin shook his head. "I'm going with you. Jason knows me. He might be afraid of the police." Jackson hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Okay, but stay behind me." They moved quickly but carefully down the hallway. Vin noticed something small and shiny on the floor, a button from a child's shirt. "It was here," Vin said quietly, showing the find to Jackson. The officer nodded, his expression even more focused. The corridor led them to a service staircase that led down, apparently to the hospital's basement. "The basement," Jackson whispered. "Clever. Fewer cameras and people there." They began to descend, trying to make as little noise as possible. The stairs were dimly lit, and Vin felt the tension building with each step. Memories of yesterday, of Emily's basement, of the fear in Jason's eyes swirled in his head. Suddenly they heard a muffled scream, the sound of a struggle, and a dull thud. Without a second thought, Vin lunged forward, overtaking Jackson, and ran down the stairs. The officer followed, cursing under his breath. They reached the bottom landing and saw another corridor going deeper into the basement. To their right was an open door, from which came the sounds of a struggle. Vin was the first to reach the door and saw a shocking scene. In a technical room filled with pipes and electrical panels, a tall man in a hospital security uniform was holding Jason with his hand over his mouth. The boy was desperately struggling, trying to break free. "Hey!" Vin shouted loudly, entering the room. "Let him go!" The man turned around abruptly, his eyes widening in surprise. Behind him, Vin noticed an open door, probably leading to a service exit from the hospital. "Don't move!" "Police!" came Jackson's voice, appearing behind Vin with a gun in his hands. The man in the guard uniform clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. He hesitated, still holding the writhing Jason. "I said let the boy go," Jackson repeated, aiming at the man. "Now!" The kidnapper, realizing he was trapped, began to slowly back away toward the back door, using Jason as a human shield. "Stay away," he hissed, "or I'll wring his neck." Vin noticed that Jason, despite his fear, retained his presence of mind. His eyes met Vin's, and the actor saw not only fear in them, but also determination. "Let him go," Vin said calmly, taking a step forward. "You can't get away. The entire hospital is surrounded by police." It was a lie, but Vin said it confidently, hoping his captor would believe it. Jackson, understanding Vin's tactics, played along. "My people are standing at all the exits. You have nowhere to run." The man hesitated, his eyes darting between Vin, Jackson, and the back door. At that moment, Jason, taking advantage of the momentary slackening of his grip, did what his mother had probably taught him to defend himself by twisting sharply and biting hard into his captor's hand. The man cried out in pain and reflexively let go of the boy. Jason, without wasting a second, rushed to Vin, who immediately grabbed him and pulled him aside behind a large pipe. The kidnapper, realizing he had lost his advantage, made a desperate dash for the back door. But Jackson was faster. The officer lunged forward, knocking the man off his feet, and they both fell to the floor. A struggle ensued. Vin held Jason close as he shook, closing his eyes so he couldn't see the brutal fight. "It's okay, buddy," he whispered. "You're safe. I've got you." The struggle between Jackson and his captor was brief but intense. The man was large and strong, but the officer had the advantage of surprise and training. After several intense moments, Jackson gained the upper hand, pinning his attacker to the floor and handcuffing him. "Taylor Reed," Jackson muttered, breathing hard. "I know you. Ex-cop, fired for abuse of power? Now you work for the likes of Richardson?" Reed didn't answer, his face twisted in anger and pain. Vin carefully led Jason to the exit, still holding him by the shoulders. "Let's get out of here, Jason," he said softly. "Your mother and aunt must be very worried." The boy nodded but suddenly stopped and turned to face his fallen captor, his small face serious and surprisingly composed for a child who had just been through such horror. My daddy said that only cowards bully those weaker than themselves, he said firmly. You and Mr. Richardson are cowards, and I'm not afraid of you. Reed grinned evilly, but remained silent under Jackson's heavy gaze. Vin felt incredibly proud of the little boy, who after all he had been through had found the strength to stand up to his abuser. Come on, hero, Vin said, squeezing Jason's shoulder lightly. Your mother's waiting. They went upstairs where Officer Morgan and his reinforcements had already met them. Sarah, exhausted with anxiety, rushed to her nephew, hugging him so tightly as if she were afraid he would disappear again. Jason! Oh my God, I'm going crazy! She covered his face with kisses, and then looked at Vin with boundless gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Diesel. Thank you again. We have to tell Mom, Jason said, his voice suddenly mature. But I don't want her to be scared. You're very caring, Vin replied, amazed at the child's fortitude. But your mother needs to know the truth, and the officers will make sure you're all safe. Officer Morgan nodded, her face serious. We'll move you to a safe place today, and we'll put up a 24-hour guard. When they got to Emily's room, her face was contorted with horror when she learned what had happened. Pale, her hands shaking, she pulled Jason into a tight hug. He won't calm down, she whispered. Even from behind bars, he won't leave us alone. Don't worry, Mrs. Brooks, assured Officer Morgan. We have all the evidence to bring new charges against Richardson for organizing the kidnapping and attempted murder of witnesses. That would add another 20 years to his sentence, and no lawyer would be able to get him out. Vin sat next to Emily's bed, watching the reunion between mother and son. Something about the image touched him deeply. Perhaps it was the realization of the fragility of human life, or the thought of how one decision to stop at that restaurant, to notice the odd couple, could change someone's destiny. Thank you for saving my son again, Emily said, looking over Jason's head at Vin. I don't know how I can... You don't owe me anything, Vin interrupted, but there is something you can do for yourself and Jason. What? She asked. Never let fear define your life, Vin said seriously. Richardson wants you to be afraid. Don't give him that satisfaction. Emily thought for a moment, then smiled weakly. You know, I've always dreamed of opening a small coffee shop, somewhere in a quiet town by the ocean, where Jason could play on the beach and I could bake blueberry muffins. She stroked her son's head. Maybe it's time to make that dream come true. Sounds great, Vin smiled. Will you come visit us? Jason asked, raising his head. I'd like to show you how I surf. I can't do it yet, but I'll learn. Vin laughed. I'll definitely come, buddy, and we'll learn to surf together. At that moment, Officer Jackson entered the room. His face was serious, but his eyes showed satisfaction. I have news, he said. Reed has spoken. He has agreed to testify against Richardson in exchange for a reduced sentence. And what did he say? Officer Morgan asked. It turns out Richardson wasn't just involved in kidnappings. Jackson glanced quickly at Jason, clearly unwilling to speak too frankly in front of the child. His financial dealings were tied to an underground drug trafficking network. He used his position at the hospital to gain access to drugs and sold them on the black market. Oh my God, Emily breathed. I didn't know anything. Nobody knew, Jackson reassured her. He was very careful. But now it's all out in the open, and we're working with the feds to expose the entire network. That means Richardson will never get out of prison, Officer Morgan added. Crimes like that carry a life sentence. The relief that crossed Emily's face was almost palpable. She hugged Jason tighter, as if she was just now truly believing that the nightmare was over. I think you should still stay in a safe place for a while, Jackson said, at least until we've got all of Richardson's accomplices figured out. But now that we have Reed, things will move a lot faster. Vin looked at this family, exhausted but unwavering in their love and resilience, and felt a strange warmth inside. He had played many heroes on screen, but he had never felt like a real hero as he did in these 2 days. Mr. Jackson, Jason said suddenly, his voice surprisingly serious for an 8-year-old. When I grow up, I want to be a police officer too, to protect people like my mother. Jackson smiled, a softness appearing in his eyes. You would be a great police officer, Jason. You already have the most important quality, courage. One more important thing, Officer Morgan added. Richardson has agreed to plead guilty to all charges. That means you won't have to testify in court and go through this whole ordeal all over again. Emily closed her eyes and tears of gratitude ran down her cheeks. Is this really the end? She whispered. Yes, Vin said firmly. This is ending, and a new chapter of your life is beginning. Suddenly, the door of the ward swung open and a nurse burst into the room with her face distorted with horror. "Officers!" she cried. "Richardson has escaped." Time seemed to stand still. Vin felt the blood drain from his face. Officers Jackson and Morgan instantly tensed, their hands instinctively going to their holsters. "What?" Jackson exclaimed. "How is this possible?" "While being transported to a federal prison," the nurse explained breathlessly, "the vehicle was involved in a staged accident. When officers came out to check, two of Richardson's accomplices attacked them. Two officers were injured, one seriously. Richardson is armed and is reportedly on his way here. He was seen entering the hospital through the service entrance 10 minutes ago." "Damn it," Jackson cursed. "Morgan, call all available personnel. Hospital lockdown immediately. No one in, no one out." "Already done," Morgan replied, putting away the radio. "The capture team will be here in 5 minutes." Vin looked at Emily, who was clutching Jason to her with such desperation that it seemed she would die protecting him. Her face, which had just been filled with hope, was now contorted with horror. "He's coming for us," she whispered. "I know he's coming for us." Vin made an instant decision. "Jackson," he said firmly, "do you have an evacuation plan for this kind of situation?" "The service elevator is at the end of the corridor," the officer answered quickly. "It leads straight to the underground parking lot. There should be a police car there." "I'll get them out of here," Vin said. "You find this bastard." Jackson hesitated for only a second, then nodded. "Morgan, go with them. I'll lead the search." "No," Vin said. "You both need to stay. No one knows Richardson better than you. You need to stop him before he gets to the other patients." "But you're a civilian," Morgan began. "Who has experience and can stand up for himself," Vin interrupted. "I trained with Special Forces for 6 years for roles, took courses in tactical shooting and hand-to-hand combat. In addition, I have a license for a weapon. I can handle it." Jackson looked at him appraisingly, then nodded. "Okay, but you're going to need this." He handed Vin his spare pistol, which he wore on his ankle. "We can't evacuate civilians unarmed in a situation like this." Vin took the weapon confidently, quickly, and professionally, checking the magazine, chamber, and safety with a deftness that backed up his words about being prepared. "I trained with this model," he said, examining the gun. "Looks like a Glock 27, right?" Jackson nodded, impressed by the actor's knowledge. The nurses quickly prepared Emily for transport, moving her onto a gurney. Vin took Jason's hand. "It's going to be okay, buddy," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We're going to get out of here." Jason squeezed his hand tightly, his small face pale but determined. "I know," he said. "You're a real hero." They emerged into the hallway, where controlled chaos reigned, nurses evacuating patients from adjacent rooms, guards taking up positions at entrances and exits. Vin led the group toward the service elevator, keeping his gun at the ready and constantly glancing over his shoulder. "Quick," he said when they reached the elevator. "Inside." Emily's gurney was wheeled in first, followed by Sarah and Jason. Vin was about to enter last when he heard gunshots and screams at the far end of the hallway. He turned to see one of the doors burst open and Richardson rush out, holding a gun to a nurse's head. Their eyes met across the hallway. Vin saw such pure, unadulterated hatred in Richardson's eyes that he froze for a moment. It was the look of a man who had lost everything but the desire for revenge. "Diesel!" Richardson growled, recognizing the actor. "Where are they?" Vin didn't have time to answer because at that moment Jason leaned out of the elevator. "Vin, hurry up!" the boy shouted. Richardson reacted instantly, throwing the nurse aside and pointing the gun at the elevator. Without a second thought, Vin rushed forward, blocking the elevator opening with his body, and pressed the button to close the doors. At that moment, a shot rang out. A sharp, searing pain shot through Vin's left shoulder. He staggered, but remained standing, blocking the elevator doors with his body as they slowly closed. "Vin!" Jason shouted, trying to get to him, but Sarah held the boy back. Emily sat up on the gurney and looked at Vin with wide eyes of horror. "Go away!" Vin shouted, overcoming the pain. "I'll hold him off." At the last moment before the elevator doors closed completely, he saw tears in Jason's eyes and despair on Emily's face. Then the doors closed, and the elevator began to descend. Vin turned toward the hallway, clutching his wounded shoulder. Blood was seeping through his fingers, but he knew the wound was not fatal. The bullet had passed right through without hitting bone. Richardson approached slowly, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "The famous Vin Diesel," he said, not lowering his gun. "Decided to play a real hero? How touching." "It's over, Richardson," Vin said. trying to keep his voice calm despite the throbbing pain. They're already far away. The police are surrounding the hospital. You have nowhere to run. You think I care? Richardson laughed, and there was a madness in his laughter. I've already lost everything. My reputation, my career, my freedom. But I'm not leaving without taking with me those who did this. His eyes narrowed. Starting with you. He raised the gun, aiming it at Vin's chest. Time slowed. Vin knew he had seconds before he could fire. He could try to shoot first, but the distance in his wound made a clean hit unlikely. Instead, he dodged to the side, ducking behind a gurney in the hallway just as a shot rang out. The bullet whizzed past his head, smashing into the wall. Vin rolled and fired from behind the gurney but missed. Richardson dove for cover too, and a shootout ensued. The hallway was empty, patients and staff sheltering in their rooms or evacuating. Only Vin and Richardson, hiding behind makeshift barricades, exchanged occasional shots. Vin was conserving his ammo, knowing he only had a few. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Diesel, Richardson shouted from his hiding place. This isn't your stupid action movie. There's no happy ending. For you, it certainly won't, Vin replied, carefully changing his position. He knew he had to buy time for Emily, Jason, and Sarah to leave the hospital. Every second Richardson delayed was their chance to survive. Suddenly, there was a clatter of feet coming from the direction of the stairs. Reinforcements were arriving. Richardson heard it too, and knew that his time was running out. With a wild roar, he burst from cover and charged forward, firing as he ran. His shots were erratic, the sign of a man who had no training with firearms. Vin, on the other hand, remembered his training, took a steady stance, exhaled, and smoothly pulled the trigger. The shot was accurate, hitting Richardson in the shoulder. The man cried out in pain, but adrenaline and desperation drove him forward. Richardson, realizing he was losing the shootout, changed tactics. He sprinted forward, ducked under the line of fire, and used his momentum to crash into the gurney Vin was hiding behind. He knocked it over with a powerful blow and fell on the actor, trying to knock the gun out of his hand. A brutal hand-to-hand fight ensued. Despite his shoulder wound, Vin had a clear advantage in physical fitness and technique. But Richardson, driven by desperation and rage, fought with the inhuman strength of a madman with nothing to lose. They rolled around the hospital hallway floor, trading blows. Blood from Vin's wound mixed with Richardson's, staining them both. I will destroy you, Richardson croaked, reaching for Vin's throat. Then I will find them and kill them. The words gave Vin new strength. He remembered Jason's frightened face, the boy's courage, his trust. He remembered the desperation in Emily's eyes, her resilience, her tenderness for her son. These people deserved a future, deserved a life without fear, and he would not let this monster take that away from them. With a snarl, Vin pulled his arm free and landed a powerful punch to Richardson's jaw. The man's head snapped back, but he still didn't give in. They continued to wrestle, sliding ever closer to the stairs. At that moment, police officers appeared from both sides of the hallway. Officer Jackson led one group, other officers from the opposite side. Stop! Police! Came the shouts. But Richardson, seeing the police, seemed to go completely mad. With superhuman effort, he tore himself from Vin's grip and, staggering, rose to his feet. A knife flashed in his hand, the same one that Jackson had confiscated from him the day before. Apparently, he had managed to get the weapon back when he attacked the convoy. You won't take me, he croaked, throwing himself at the nearest policeman. Shots rang out, several police officers opening fire at once, following protocol for neutralizing an armed assailant. Richardson flinched from the impact, his body convulsing. He took another shaky step forward and collapsed to the floor of the hospital corridor. His eyes, still full of hatred and madness, stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, and then his gaze froze forever. The police immediately surrounded the body, checking for a pulse and disarming the dropped knife. Vin, clutching his wounded shoulder, struggled to his feet. Jackson quickly ran to him, supporting him by his good arm. Damn it, Diesel, the officer said with a mixture of professional respect and genuine concern. You just did the work of a SWAT team. We need to get that wound looked at immediately. Did they manage to leave? Vin interrupted, waving off his own concerns. Emily, Jason, Sarah, are they safe? Yes, Jackson nodded. Our patrol is already escorting them to safety. They're fine. Vin felt an incredible sense of relief wash over him as he looked down at Richardson's body lying in a pool of blood on the hospital floor. Now it's really all over, he said quietly. The medical team worked quickly and professionally. The traumatologist examined Vin's wound and determined that the bullet had passed right through the soft tissue of the shoulder without hitting the bone, major vessels, or nerve trunks. "You're lucky, Mr. Diesel," the doctor said, injecting a local anesthetic around the wound. "A clean, penetrating wound. It'll require debridement and stitches, but there's no serious damage. You'll be good as new in a few weeks." Vin was given an IV drip of antibiotics and painkillers, but he insisted on being allowed to contact Emily and Jason before the surgery. "I need to know they're safe," he told the nurse firmly. "Please." When the connection was established through the secure police line, and he heard Jason's worried voice, something inside him finally calmed down. "Vin, you're alive!" The boy cried, and you could hear that he was crying with happiness. "The officer said that you were shot." "Just a scratch, buddy," Vin replied with a smile, trying to sound cheerful despite the mounting pain. "I promised to teach you how to surf, remember?" "I remember," Jason answered through tears. "Mom wants to talk to you too." There was a rustling sound on the line, and then Emily's voice. "Vin? Oh my God, are you okay? The police said you were hurt." "Just a scratch," Vin lied, not wanting to worry her. "Nothing to worry about. How are you?" We're alive thanks to you," her voice wavered. "Richardson?" "Dead," Vin answered shortly. "He'll never hurt anyone again." He heard Emily take a deep breath, as if she were lifting an invisible weight from her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. For our lives. For our freedom. For the future." Vin felt a lump rise in his throat. "It's just the beginning, Emily," he said. "Now you can open that coffee shop by the ocean, and I'll definitely come try your blueberry muffins." He heard her quiet laughter through her tears, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. "We will wait for you," she said. "Always." At that point, the doctors made it clear that he needed to go to the operating room immediately. Vin reluctantly said goodbye, promising to call as soon as he could. As he was wheeled through the hospital corridors, he thought about the strange twist of fate. One spontaneous decision to go into an ordinary fast food restaurant led to the saving of 2 lives and to the fact that for the first time he felt like a real hero and not just an actor playing a role. The last thing he saw before he was put under anesthesia was the image of Jason, a brave boy with a broken toy who found the strength to ask for help. And in that moment, Vin realized that he had met a true hero. Not on the screen, but in real life, in the person of a little boy who saved his mother. 3 months later, Vin stood on the beach in a small California town, watching Jason laugh as he struggled to stay on his surfboard in the shallows. The sun was setting, painting the ocean in shades of gold and purple. "Look, Vin, I'm holding on," the boy shouted, bouncing on the board. "Well done, buddy," Vin shouted back, giving him a thumbs up. "You're about to go pro." He turned to see Emily standing on the veranda of a small coffee shop right on the beach. Her blonde hair was blowing in the wind, and her eyes no longer held the fear he had seen in the hospital. They now held a calm and quiet happiness. She smiled and waved at him, inviting him to join her. Vin waved back and headed towards the coffee shop, feeling a pleasant warmth in his chest. The sign at the coffee shop read, "Jason's." Emily named the place after her son, her little hero. Inside, it smelled of fresh pastries and coffee. Soft music played, and the walls were decorated with children's drawings and photographs of the ocean. "Did you enjoy your surfing lessons with Jason?" Emily asked, placing a cup of coffee and a plate of blueberry muffins in front of him. "He's incredible," Vin answered sincerely. "So brave and determined. I can't imagine how such a small body could have so much fortitude." Emily looked lovingly at her son, still playing in the waves. "He's a lot like his father," she said quietly. "Robert always said that the most important things in life were to be kind and brave. Jason remembered that." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun slowly sink into the ocean. Vin thought that all his Hollywood awards were not worth the feeling he felt right now, seeing these 2 people happy and free. "You know," Emily said suddenly, looking at the sunset, "I never thought I'd feel safe again. That I'd be able to sleep at night without flinching at every rustle. That I'd see Jason laughing so carefree." She turned to Vin, tears glistening in her eyes. "You didn't just give us life, Vin. You gave us freedom." Vin felt his own eyes fill with moisture. He silently reached out and squeezed her hand. "No," he said quietly. "You gave me something much greater. You showed me what it means to be a real hero. Not one who plays a role on screen, but one who does the right thing when it's hardest." Jason ran out of the water, wet and happy, with his board under his arm. Vin! Mom, did you see? I almost caught a wave. We saw it, champion. Vin smiled. You were magnificent. The boy beamed with pride. He placed the board against the wall and climbed onto the chair next to Vin. When I grow up, he said, biting into a muffin with a serious expression, I want to be like you. Not just an actor, but a person who helps others. Vin looked at this amazing child who had survived such horror, but retained the purity of his heart and the kindness of his soul. You're better than me already, buddy, he said, ruffling Jason's wet hair. A lot better. The sun finally disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the last glimmers of gold and scarlet in the sky. The lights of small cafes and bars lit up on the shore. Music played somewhere in the distance. Will you stay for dinner? Emily asked. I made your favorite dish. With pleasure, Vin replied. But first I want to show you something. He pulled a small box out of his pocket and handed it to Jason. The boy opened it curiously and gasped. Inside was a toy truck, an exact copy of the broken one Jason had brought to him at the restaurant. Only this one was made of silver and covered in engraving. Turn him over, Vin said softly. Jason turned the truck over and read the engraving on the bottom. To the bravest heart I know. Vin. Jason stared at the toy, speechless. Then he looked up at Vin, and there was so much love and gratitude in his eyes that the actor felt like his heart was about to jump out of his chest. Without a word, the boy rushed to him and hugged him tightly. Emily looked at them, her eyes shining with tears and happiness. Family, Jason said quietly, not letting go of Vin. We're family now, right? Vin hugged the boy back, feeling the last shards of ice in his soul melt from this simple, childish question. Yeah, buddy, he replied, looking over Jason's head at Emily, who was looking at them with love and hope. We're a family now. At that moment on the ocean shore in a small coffee shop named after a brave boy, something new was born. Not just friendship or gratitude, but a real family created not by blood, but by love, courage, and that amazing twist of fate that brought them all to that fast food restaurant on a cold New York day.